Hello, everybody. My name is Bruce Jacobs. We're about to get started. I see we have a number of people on the site already, although there's still a few that might be coming, but we'll get ourselves started. So I wanted to welcome everyone. Thank you for coming, for sharing your time with me. This is going to be an hour and a half worth of insightful, hopefully, and certainly long and thought out questions and issues about how do we deal with an underwater mortgage. And by an underwater mortgage, we talk about property that you owe much more than it's worth. So let me first start off by telling you a little bit about me. So I'm originally from New York. I went to Fordham Law School where I graduated in 1996. I moved to Miami in 1997 to be a Miami-Dade County prosecutor. It was a great experience for me. It's how I started my career learning how to try cases. And I tried probably about 30 jury trials, God knows how many bench trials while I was there. I left the Miami-Dade County State Attorney's Office and I was an A-level felony prosecutor handling things like armed robberies and child molesters and very serious kinds of cases. It was a great time for me and for moving to Miami. And I left the State Attorney's Office when I finally needed to make some money and start a life, and I went and ultimately worked for a firm called Kamner, Lipsitz and Poller. Fred Kamner was the president and CEO of Bank United, as many of you may have heard. Back when I was there, Bank United was the largest federal savings bank headquartered in Florida. Unfortunately, they imploded under all of their exotic mortgages that they were doing. While I was working for Kamner, Lipsitz and Poller, we handled all kinds of different litigation for and against the banks. It was not just foreclosures that I dealt with. However, I did oversee the foreclosure department for the firm, and I've represented Bank United and other banks in foreclosures throughout Florida. I did that for a number of years, and then in 2006 I started my own firm. In 2008, I had my first client that called me up and said, Mr. Jacobs, I'm having a problem with my mortgage. Maybe you can help me out here. If you could, look at my file and tell me if you see anything and if you can help, because I'm upside down and it's a problem. And I looked at it and I realized for the first time that, this was really something that I knew I could help my client with. I knew that it was going to be a meaningful way of helping them if I could get them out of the hardship of being in an underwater mortgage. And frankly, when I was working for the banks, the least favorite part of my job was taking people out of their homes. It was part of the job, but generally it wasn't personal unless I had someone who was being, who I felt was being fraudulent or who was doing things they shouldn't have been doing. But ultimately, I decided that it was time to start helping people that were in trouble with foreclosures and use my trial experience and my banking experience to that benefit. So now, 3 years later, we are here. So we have a number of you that have logged in. Just to let you know, there is a question and answer option under the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions or answers, please feel free to post a question. What I'll do is I'll take breaks or I'll stop at different times. If I see a question that is in the direction we need to go, and I can get to it there without going on too far of a tangent, I'll try to get to it immediately. Otherwise, we'll go through at different breaks and work that out. So let's get started. Let's talk about, what do you do here? You are a borrower. Let's say you have, you bought in the height of the market, 2006, 2007. You paid $500,000 for that beautiful condo on the beach that's now worth about $3. And that's a serious problem. And you have to make a decision. And really the only decision you get to make is whether you're going to pay. I mean, if you pay, then there's no problems and there's no resolution. Except for that, you're going to honor the commitment that you had, and that's certainly the path of least resistance. Now, if you don't pay, that's when things can start to maneuver into an option that might resolve this situation. Now, I don't recommend that anyone simply not pay. I want to make sure I'm clear about that with everyone from the very beginning. Not paying is something that is going to create a whole series of reactions from your lender. And you got to think about it in terms of what does the lender want, obviously, is to get paid as much as they can for the whole life of the loan. And they have different things that they've put in place to make sure that if you don't pay, there's going to be consequences. So one of the first things you'll notice when you stop paying is that the phone will start ringing, and you'll start hearing, usually what they have is what they call robocallers. It's the same systems that call right before the elections and tell you who you should vote for. Well, the banks have it, and they basically tell you who you should pay. And you'll get a phone call, and it will start off with the same Fair Debt Collection Practices Act disclaimer that this is an attempt to collect a debt, and anything said will be used to collect that debt. And then they'll ask you, can you pay? Now, I try to tell my clients to be mindful of who you're dealing with for that phone call, and we'll get a little bit further into that. But recognize that the purpose of calling you, of stopping by, whatever they're going to do, is to try to get you simply to pay. Now, besides harassing you, the other thing that they'll try to do is they'll affect your credit score. Once you're 30 days late, it will get posted to that effect. 60 days late, 90 days late, 120 days late is probably about as much as the days late numbers go. It'll just go above that after that. And then they will try to put a foreclosure on, ultimately a judgment. All of that will go on your credit score. For the people that aren't making what I call a strategic default, they're just defaulting and walking away and putting their head in the sand. They're going to have the most difficult time cleaning their credit when this is all over and suffer the worst damage from this experience because they're giving the banks a free shot. Now, there's also the risk of losing your home, which is obviously not something that anyone wants to do, but it is certainly what the bank's trying to do. And then last but not least is the risk of the deficiency judgment. So we talked about robocalling and harassment, and what we're basically talking about here is there'll be robocalls. Usually they're about 8 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. Sometimes my clients have had people come and knock on their door and give them a card saying, please call my bank. A lot of them get letters from the bank saying, call us, call us, call us. And if you think about the way these debt collection operations work, their whole premise is the more I harass you, the more I touch you and poke you about this debt, the more likely I'm going to be able to prey on your fears and prey on your insecurities and whatever other things they can prey on to get you to write a check. That's really all they're looking for. So what can you do if you have someone who is harassing you? Well, there's something called the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. And this is a federal statute that's intended to give people a chance to fight back against these harassing debt collectors. Now, it's just some basic statutory rules that I want to make sure everyone's aware about. If you have a debt collector that's calling you at 7 o'clock in the morning, or it calls you at the office and you tell them, my employer does not want me to take these types of calls here at the office, please stop. Or if they're calling your mother or your friend or your boss or someone else about your credit other than you, your lawyer, or the credit bureau. Or if you make a demand in writing for them to stop contacting you. Or you hire a lawyer and the lawyer puts them on notice that you're represented by counsel. All of those communications would violate the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. So let's talk about this, because this is really one of the first things that we try to make sure people are aware of, because there is some leverage in this. For starters, you get to sue your lender, and it's a lawsuit that if you can prove your case, there's money to be made and there's leverage to be had. So let's talk about how do you prove your case? What's the ways of collecting evidence in a Fair Debt Collection Practices Act? Well, there's two basic ones. The first is you can record the call. Now you can go old school or you can go new school, or you can do it however you choose to record it. But whatever method you use, you must tell them that you are recording them first. The way the conversation should go is, do you mind if I'm going to record this call. If you want to continue talking to me, please understand you're being recorded. Now it's up to them whether they want to continue to talk to you or not. If you have them on record and they are going through your phone, going through and making statements and doing things that either are inappropriate, if they are abusive, if they have profanity, if they are contacting you after you've told them that they can't contact you at work, or through direct writing telling them not to call you, or through your lawyer, having that recording and being able to preserve that evidence will be something that down the road could mean the difference between you having a good Fair Debt Collections Practice Act violation or a bad one. Another thing I recommend is that you make a log. The date, the time, who you spoke to, what was the conversation. It's important because it gives you a basis to fight back, and a lot of what I believe is when you negotiate from strength, it's because you are going to make sure that you hold them to their burden and press them when they violate the law that is intended to protect you. And if you do sue, and we are successful, there's first off statutory damages of up to $1,000, plus actual damages, which we'll talk about during another seminar if we really want to get into a Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. But also you can get attorney's fees and costs. Now, all of these claims can ultimately prove to be leverage that a bank who doesn't want to fight will use as another reason for them to work something out and leave you alone. So let's talk about some of the different issues that we're going to see when you stop paying your mortgage. One of the things that we talked about was your credit score. Now, credit score is something that I think we all have to understand. Like, what is it? What are we talking about when we're talking about a FICO score? Well, it's a series of calculations that are done by these credit bureaus, which take into account the amount of outstanding debt you have, the amount of available credit you have, your payment history, whether you've been looking for more credit. These are all issues and factors that no one really is told, how they all specifically work, but they're certainly, have been used for a long time to try to keep people, it's the report card after you graduate from school. It's the last report card that you're ever going to have to deal with. So let's talk a little bit about what happens, or how your credit is affected when you stop paying your mortgage. And I'll tell you that it's not just when you stop paying your mortgage, it's when you do anything with your mortgage other than pay it as agreed. So I've had some clients that have come to me who have said, Mr. Jacobs, I've been 60 days late for the last 6 months. And what they fail to recognize is that they're hurting their credit without really gaining very much leverage, because the banks are still getting paid. Whether you're 60 days late or 30 days late or 90 days late, if they're still getting their payments every month after that, you're hurting your credit without much benefit to you. Now, many people were shocked to find out, probably about a year and a half ago this information came out, that if you get a loan modification, you do all that process and you get the bank to work with you, and they give you an agreement that lowers your interest rate or does whatever they're going to do to lower your payment, you're once again not paying as agreed. That will affect your credit.